right, everyone, get ready, because today we are diving headfirst into Spanish law.
Oh, exciting.
But seriously, folks, it's way more interesting than it sounds.
Yeah.
We're getting up close and personal with Spain's waste management law, and let me tell you, it goes way beyond just separating your plastics from your paper.
It really does. It's actually pretty fascinating.
So consider this our deep dive into a system that's aiming to completely transform Spain's economy.
Yeah, what's really interesting here is that Spain is really going for it. They're aiming for a complete shift towards what they call a circular low-carbon economy.
Okay, circular economy. That has a nice ring to it, but break it down for me. What does that actually mean? Like, in plain English, and why should we even care? I mean, I don't have any plans to move to Spain anytime soon, so...
That's a fair point. It is a bit of a buzzword these days, I'll grant you that.
Yeah.
So, essentially, a circular economy, it's all about eliminating waste.
Okay.
By keeping resources in use for as long as possible. Think of it like a loop, instead of, a straight line from production to the trash can. It's about completely changing how we think about how we make things, use things, and ultimately how we get rid of things.
So it's not just about dealing with the waste after it's already been created. This law is trying to prevent that waste from the beginning.
Exactly. And it's not just about being eco-friendly, though that's obviously a huge part of it.
Right.
Spain is betting that this shift is going to actually boost their economy in the long run. Mm-hmm. The goal is to what they call decouple economic growth from environmental impact.
Decouple, okay, meaning...
Right? They want to see their economy grow without necessarily using more resources, generating more waste, all that.
So they're trying to break that link between economic growth and environmental damage. That's pretty ambitious.
Totally.
But how do you actually get businesses on board with this whole circular economy thing? It sounds like a massive change.
Yeah, it's a huge shift in thinking, for sure. And that's why this law is so interesting. It goes way beyond just setting some targets and hoping for the best. They're introducing this really interesting concept called the waste hierarchy.
Okay, waste hierarchy. I'm picturing a pyramid. What's at the top, like the most favored option?
You got it. Prevention is king. The absolute top priority is to avoid creating waste in the first place.
Makes sense.
Then we move down to reuse, finding ways to give products a second life before they hit the recycling bin. Then we're talking recycling, followed by energy recovery, basically squeezing whatever value we can out of waste before it's finally,
out of options.
disposed of. And at the very, very bottom of the pyramid, the least favorite option is disposal.
So this isn't just about sorting your trash correctly anymore. It's about completely rethinking our relationship with the stuff we buy and get rid of.
Exactly.
This whole hierarchy thing seems like a pretty clever way to encourage that shift, though.
It really is. And here's the thing. This hierarchy isn't just like a suggestion. This is the law. This is legally binding now. Right. And it's influencing all kinds of policy decisions across different sectors. This is where the rubber really meets the road,
Okay, so we've got this whole waste hierarchy thing going on, a legal roadmap to a circular economy. It sounds great in theory, but give me some concrete examples. How does this thing actually play out in everyday life?
All right. Let's bring it down to earth then. Let's talk about something we can all relate to.
Okay.
Food waste.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all been there, right? Tossing out wilted lettuce, forgetting about those leftovers in the back of the fridge.
Guilty as charged.
But under this law, businesses in Spain, they actually have a legal obligation to minimize their food waste. And it's not just about, composting those scraps.
Yeah, so how does it work? What's the game plan for tackling food waste, Spanish style?
Okay, so picture this. You're a restaurant owner in, say, Barcelona. You've got a kitchen full of delicious food.
Sounds nice.
But at the end of the night, there are always going to be some unsold dishes. Now, under this law, you can't just scrape it all into the trash.
Sure.
There's a clear order of priority for how you have to deal with that unsold food.
Okay, so what comes first?
Donation. First and foremost, you've got to try and get that perfectly good food to people who need it by partnering with food banks, charities, that kind of thing.
Makes sense.
Then, if that's not possible, they can look at using it for animal feed. And so on, down the line, turning it into compost, maybe even some energy recovery, with disposal as the absolute last resort.
So it's a step-by-step approach, no more easy way out for those businesses.
Exactly. And it's not just about food waste either. Remember we were talking about how bio-waste is pretty high up on that waste hierarchy?
Right, composting time.
This law does not mess around when it comes to composting. They've got it all mapped out.
Seriously, they wrote a whole section of the law about composting.
Well, maybe not a whole section, but it's pretty close.
Yeah.
They go into so much detail about how bio-waste, things like food scraps, yard waste, even your coffee grounds.
Oh, so it is getting serious.
Yeah, all that has to be collected and treated in a very specific way.
Okay, now I'm curious, what kind of specifics are we talking about here?
We're talking about separate collection systems, the types of containers that are allowed, even the type of biodegradable bags you can use.
Wow, composting with a side of bureaucracy.
And get this, in some places, residents are even required to separate their bio-waste into different categories.
They are not messing around. This all sounds great, but how do they actually enforce this? Is there a compost police I haven't heard of?
No compost police, thankfully. Yeah. But there are some pretty effective ways to make sure people follow the rules.
Okay, how so?
Well, remember we were talking about extended producer responsibility, EPR?
Yeah, vaguely.
That's where this really comes in.
Refresh my memory. How's that work again?
So let's say you're a company, you sell plastic bottles in Spain, right? You can't just send those bottles out into the world and be done with it. Under this law, you're on the hook for making sure that a good chunk of those bottles actually get recycled. We're talking 90% by 2029.
90%? That's pretty ambitious.
It is. And here's the kicker. If companies don't hit those targets, then bam, a nationwide deposit return system for plastic bottles automatically kicks in.
Oh, wow. Talk about an incentive to hit those recycling goals.
Right. They're serious about this. It's all about forcing producers to think ahead, design products with recycling in mind right from the start, and yeah, invest in better recycling infrastructure. But hold on, there's more.
There's always more.
Remember how we talked about how Spain wants to be top dog in this whole circular economy thing?
Yeah.
Well, they're taking it a step further and looking at the online world too.
Oh, interesting. What are they creating, like a digital recycling bin?
No, not quite.
Yeah.
But they are recognizing that in this day and age, the lines are getting blurry between your traditional producers and these online platforms when it comes to who's responsible for waste.
Makes sense.
So now online platforms, your e-commerce sites, online marketplaces, they're actually considered producers if they sell products from companies that aren't following these waste regulations.
Wait, so if an online marketplace lets someone sell, like, I don't know, a coffee maker that doesn't meet these recycling standards, the marketplace itself could face the consequences.
You got it. It's a way to bring this law into the digital age, really drive home that everyone's got skin in the game when it comes to creating a more circular economy.
I like it. Accountability for all.
Exactly. But it's not just about pointing fingers, you know. The law also gets into the nitty-gritty of what happens when people don't follow the rules, what kind of punishments they're facing.
Okay, so time to lay down the law. What are the consequences if you decide to play fast and loose with these waste management rules? Are we talking a slap on the wrist or something a bit more painful?
Let's just say Spain means business. This law's got some teeth.
Oh.
We're talking fines, penalties, and for those bigger offenses, they're not afraid to name and shame publicly. They can actually publish the names of offenders.
No way.
Oh, yeah. Imagine being called out as a litter bug on a national scale. That's got to sting.
That's some serious reputational damage. Definitely gets the message across. But, you know, so far we've been talking about preventing future waste. What about cleaning up the mess that's already been made? What about land that's, well, already contaminated?
That's a great point. And yeah, this law doesn't shy away from that legacy of past pollution at all. Imagine this. You finally found it, that perfect plot of land. You're ready to build your dream home.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
And then you discover, surprise, you're sitting on top of a toxic waste dump.
Okay, yeah, that dream home just became a nightmare.
Great. Well, this law tackles that head on. There's a whole section in there all about contaminated land. It lays out a really clear process for, first of all, figuring out if there's a risk, then how you actually declare a piece of land as contaminated, and most importantly, who's responsible for cleaning it up.
So say you find contamination on your property, what happens then? Who ends up paying for the cleanup?
That's where it gets interesting. The law looks at a whole bunch of things, like who actually caused the contamination, even if it happened decades ago.
So there's no statute of limitations on pollution?
Nope. It could be the current landowner on the hook, but it could also be the company or even the individual responsible for the pollution in the first place, even if they're long gone.
So you can't just bury the evidence and hope it goes away.
Exactly. Nice try. It's all about accountability here. But I know you're thinking tracking down those responsibles, especially for stuff that happened ages ago, that's got to be tricky.
Yeah, talk about a forensic investigation.
Well, Spain's got a pretty clever system for this. Ready for it. Contaminated land actually has to be officially marked in the land registry.
Wow, that's a game changer. So even if you can't see the contamination, if you're thinking of buying a property, boom, you know about it up front.
Exactly. No more buying a contaminated property by accident.
No more inheriting an environmental disaster that's huge.
It's all about transparency, preventing future problems before they even start. And get this, it has big implications for any kind of construction or development, too. Imagine you're planning this massive new project. You're all set to go, and then you find out the land is contaminated. Talk about a wrench in the gears.
Yeah, not to mention a massive expense.
This registry helps avoid those headaches, those budget blowouts, and of course, it helps protect public health and the environment too.
Talk about thinking ahead. It's incredible. This whole deep dive into Spain's waste management law has been a wild ride. Who knew trash could be this interesting?
Right.
We've gone from sorting our recycling to a complete economic overhaul, and it's all thanks to this one super ambitious piece of legislation.
It just goes to show you how something as, seemingly mundane as waste management can actually lead to some really big changes.
Absolutely. It's been amazing to see how Spain is tackling this global challenge head on. I mean, their approach is seriously innovative, could be a model for other countries to follow.
Totally. And for anyone listening, even if you're not planning on relocating to Spain anytime soon,
Right.
It really highlights how we all have a part to play in creating a more sustainable future, whether it's being mindful of our own consumption habits, maybe even pushing for policies that promote a more circular economy. Every little bit helps.
Couldn't agree more. And as we wrap up this deep dive into the fascinating world of Spanish waste management, one final thought to leave you with. If tackling something like waste can spark so much innovation, so many economic opportunities, what other industries, what other challenges could benefit from this kind of circular approach? Could we apply these same principles to fashion, to electronics, to how we design our cities? Keep those brain cogs turning, folks, because the journey towards a more sustainable future, that's an adventure that's just beginning. Keep exploring, everyone.